just finished Murderland. I have a couple of problems with it. History is not boring unless you're doing it wrong.
Welcome to Rainy Day Rabbit Holes, where the West gets weird and so do we.
I'm Shea.
And I'm Jody.
Let's fall down the rabbit hole. Just finished Murderland.
Yes.
Like last week, listening to it. Very good book. I can see why she's a Pulitzer Prize winner. And I have a couple of problems with it. And I have a couple of weird connections to it.
Okay.
Too. My connection to it is, I don't know if you remember in the book, she mentions many times her best friend, Susie Warner.
Mm-hmm.
Susie Warner lived across the street from me in Normandy Park for 10 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I was in the middle of listening to it, and I went to Normandy Park to walk my dog in front of my old house because I was like, look, dog, here's where I used to live.
Yeah.
Because, dogs care.
Because they do.
And I ran into her husband, Jeff, and I was like, hey, I was listening to this and I heard your wife's name. Are we talking about the same Sue Warner Bean? And he's like, yep, they grew up next to each other on Mercer Island and they were best friends.
Wow.
Which I thought was really cool.
It's such a small world.
Yeah. And I mean, and then again, you and I both have the connection of Chris having consulted on the book.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really cool. So our boss, Chris, from Pretty Gritty Tours actually helped out on that book. I thought that was really cool.
Really cool.
But here's my problems with it. Well, I loved the book. I thought the storytelling was great. I thought the premise of lead and arsenic and other contaminants from all of the industry being a maybe pertinent factor in the development of serial killers in these areas. I had a big problem with a picture that was painted of Tacoma that she never rectified.
Yeah.
Like she made Tacoma sound like a shithole and like it's still a shithole. And I think people probably are going to come away from that book with a very negative viewpoint of Tacoma, which I don't think is fair today.
It's
or
not
accurate.
fair. And that's like what Chris is. That's why he started his tour company in the first place, was to show people like how awesome Tacoma can be. I agree with that.
I was hoping that at the end, she would say Tacoma has done a lot of work on cleaning up the contaminated areas. She talked about Point Ruston a lot. That was a super fun site, and there was a lot of work done for cleanup. And, they're doing a lot of work in the port to clean the water up and clean up industry. Like the rendering plant is now gone, which is great because that was a big contributor to the Tacoma aroma. The Tacoma aroma is gone. I'm sorry.
It's gone.
It's 100% gone. I mean, every city is going to have some weird stink on certain days if you have any sort of industry there. But I haven't smelled anything the last several years.
Yeah.
Especially in the summer. It's been really nice.
Other than maybe when the tide's out and you can smell the tide flats. But that's going to be anywhere. You smell the tide flats in any city that has tide flats.
Yeah. It's funny you bring that up because it'll be interesting to see how this goes with Hanford because like there are definitely things that have been kept from us and whatnot, but people will sometimes, as I watched videos and did research for this episode, some of the stuff, especially from like 8 years ago, there were a couple things where I was like, this seems to be exaggerated. Like there's definitely a lot of stuff that needs to be fixed, but kind of like, okay, this, I knew like certain things had changed or certain things weren't happening anymore. And I did feel like that when she brought up Tacoma. And it's also something, I was just listening to a Crime Junkie podcast, and I am really frustrated with how they describe Washington State as a whole.
What?
Yeah, they're like, don't go to Washington State. There's so many serial killers there. You don't want to go to Washington, But then like half the stories they talk about happen in their own state. But like the one I was listening to actually, I think took place in Tacoma or near it because they showed the Narrows Bridge and they're like, of course this is from Washington. And I was kind of like, hey now.
Rude. Well, also all those serial killers were in like the 80s and the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Like that is not happening today.
No.
So yeah. Oh,
it's okay. We don't really want people to come here.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want them here.
Right.
Let them think it's awful.
Yeah, Washington's a whole. Go to somewhere else.
Go somewhere else.
Go to Texas.
But yeah, I felt that. I don't know if that was something, if that was her thing, if it was an editor thing, if it was like, well, Tacoma's, because people that haven't visited there think that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even if you live in Washington State, if you haven't actually visited Tacoma in the last 5 years and explored it at all, you still probably have that idea of, you just think of the Tacoma aroma, you think of like the bad parts of Tacoma,
Right.
and you don't see the good parts of Tacoma, the beauty, the historical preservation. But what I think some of it came down to, she grew up on Mercer Island, so there's a little bit of Mercer Island snobbishness, I
Yep.
think,
I
happening.
picked up on that too.
Yeah, for sure. Like, my boss lives in Queen Anne and is an absolute snob when it comes to anything that is outside of Seattle or Bellevue. Like, anything south of I-90, he's so snobbish about. So I think that was part of it. The other problem I had with the book is she had a lot of storylines going at once.
Yes.
There was like an octopus of storylines, and she would switch back and forth in a way that was a little bit jarring, and I would lose where I was in the story. She would mention something happening, and I was like, wait a minute, are we with the Hillside Strangler? Are we with the I-5 killer? Are we with the BTK? Are we with Ted Bundy? Like, or are we just talking about geological things for some reason?
Right, because she's like, on the map, it's this. So I actually bought a physical copy of the book because I was trying to listen to it. And there were parts where I'm like, what is she talking about? And there's some pictures and maps in the actual book that helped. But at the same time, I'm like, I was confused on what the geology had to do with anything.
Yeah, I did too. Like, is it the Pacific Northwest is a ticking time bomb?
For an earthquake?
Well, or for Mount Rainier to blow up. But I mean,
but what does it have to do with serial killers?
It does.
Like, the premise of the book was that lead and arsenic and other contaminants could have had an effect on these people to help create serial killers. So what is the owl, the
Yeah. I kept
geologic
thinking of
thing?
Twin Peaks.
Same?
I was like, the owl
And
is
I
not
just
what they
kept
seem.
seeing an owl in my head.
Yep, me too.
Or the staircase, like.
Exactly.
Anyway, otherwise, I think it's a great book.
Yeah. The concept at first I thought was kind of bonkers because I was like, is she a scientist? Is she like, has she? And so I went into it really skeptically, and I told Chris that too. And he's like, it gets really dark really fast. I said, okay, I'm okay with that. I'm used to reading and watching stuff like that. He's like, it gets really dark. And there were times where I would be like, I need to take a break.
Yeah, she was describing some of the heinous things that happened to the victims of these people, and I'm just like,
in quite a bit of detail. And
yeah, too much detail.
Too much.
Yeah, and that was another problem I had where it was like gratuitous.
Yeah. And so 2 kind of small tangents. One does have to do with Tacoma though. So I was on a tour at Sacagawea State Park, and I sit in the front when Ranger Mary gives a talk to the guests in the back. And this family came in, a homeschool family. They shared with me like, this is 1 hour lessons, blah, blah, blah. Awesome. And I said, well, where do you live? And was it Port Orchard? I don't know. But is that even near Tacoma?
I mean,
it's on the peninsula-ish. It's
okay.
It's
so she said Port Orchard.
It's Gig Harbor, but not to Bremerton.
Yeah, so it's between Gig Harbor and Bremerton, basically.
So she said Port Orchard. She's like, not from Tacoma. And then she started kind of dissing Tacoma. I go, oh, that's really interesting because our tour name is named after the gritty city because so many people give Tacoma a bad name. And our tour guide was tired of, our founder was tired of that. And so he started looking into the history, and I like wrote down the webpage for her and everything. And she was like, this sounds really, and like totally switched when I brought that up. I don't know if either of you have watched that new Ed Gein show on Netflix.
Yeah, I have seen it.
I don't have Netflix right now.
I have seen it.
It's a lot, but I knew going into it, I knew the story. So I was like, I can deal with this. But then at the end, Ryan Murphy or whoever wrote it, he produced it, came up with this story, which never happened.
Most of that didn't.
Most of it didn't.
True.
Yeah. I think it was the second to last episode, but they start showing all these other serial killers. And one of them's Ted Bundy. And one of the women that he's torturing on the show was my mom's friend. So like actually watching it, I was like, I don't think I can do this. They show him going back and doing stuff to the bodies. And I was just like, no.
Yeah. Knowing that is supposed to be like your mom's friend.
Yeah. Janice Ott. I was just like,
well, Janice Ott was your mom's friend. Oh, geez.
And then the one from Ellensburg.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, I know what he did and I've studied it, but then watching like a fictionalized version of it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's what the victims of Dahmer's families felt. Cause like I finally got through Dahmer. It was, it was pretty good. But I also now I think even more understand like why so many family members were upset. So
that's why when Shea and I started this podcast, I was like, I don't want to do any stories that have people whose families are still alive when we tell this story. Because if we don't get it right, that's worse than not doing it at all, or getting it wrong when you have family that's still impacted. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah, and we didn't want to. I don't want to be describing terrible things that.
There's
one
ways
human
to
does
describe
another.
how awful this is and how we've learned and whatever without going into gratuitous detail.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I mean, we just recorded an episode about the Tylenol murders and the Stella Nickel Excedrin murders. And that was as close to true crime as we've gotten, and even that felt a little icky.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, that was my tangent on Murderland.